At this point, I'd probably be a little bit too late for a Jormungandr first look, especially on PTS, so I probably wait with that until live client and make it as a guide or something right away. But there's something else that I wanted to do beforehand for Jormungandr, and that is testing various interactions that he has with other gods, because a lot of you have been asking about specific interactions, how exactly they work, and that's what we're going to look into. Before we get started, a big thanks to Alpha Jackal, who has been helping me with testing all these interactions and has sacrificed some of his time for it. If you want to check him out, you can do that on one hand on his YouTube channel, which I'll link right here, and on the other hand on his Twitter, which will be linked down below. I much appreciate it if you did that. If you don't know who Alpha Jackal is, he's the current coach for Team Queso, ex-coach for Team Rival, and also one of your current Olympians. And now, let's look at Jormungandr. We'll simply go through the interactions in the order that we tested it in-game, and talk about interactions between Jormungandr and specific gods, as well as those that affect multiple gods, like for example things regarding the stealth or regarding breaking his abilities and similar. The first one that we'll have here is Kumbhakarna. Let's just say we're starting off with a very interesting case here. Now, according to the way the CC is defined, both his root and his mesmerize should work as normal, which they actually do, so he still has ways of CCing Jormungandr. However, his ultimate will not CC Jormungandr at all. Now, that's not really surprising, it is a knockup or a banish rather, and that doesn't work on Jormungandr. But what's interesting is that even the initial bump where Kumbhakarna basically hits him first does not deal damage. There is no damage dealt from this ability to Jormungandr at all, which makes him a very strong pick against Kumbhakarna. And as if that wasn't enough, there's an even stronger counter mechanic that is included in his kit, or at least an equally strong one. And that is in Kumbhakarna's passive and how it interacts with Jormungandr's basic attacks. Now in this context, it's worth pointing out that Jormungandr's basic attacks work a little bit differently. If you're not aware yet, they don't really have attack speed in that sense, but rather they attack very quickly at the start, a lot of quick breath basically, quick ticks, and then slow down over time, and depending on how much attack speed you have, the slowing down happens at a later point. While originally these basic attacks also interacted with items like Demonic Grip or Telekine's Ring, that was very quickly removed for a good reason. The initial ticks are obviously way too fast, and it would have just turned Jormungandr into a super strong basic attack guardian. So that was already removed on the current version of PTS. What is not removed and what actually works is attacking Kumbhakarna in his passive. And you can imagine what that means if you have a lot of very quick basic attack ticks at the start of your chain. Kumbhakarna's health, when in his passive, or his health points rather, get burned down so quickly that not even any hunter with full attack speed could keep up with the speed Jormungandr can do that with. He absolutely destroys Kumbhakarna with that. As such, Kumbhakarna is probably the weakest pick that I could think of against Jormungandr overall, just because there's so many things he can't do and so many things he is countered in. The next pick has, I would say, a bit of a better time, but still not the best time, and that is our Kuang. Now, our Kuang's kit as a whole works normal against Jormungandr. Of course, there isn't really much to consider here except a slow, and that works as usual. The ultimate, however, is interesting. It does not work like a normal execute works on our Kuang, but also doesn't mean that you can't kill with the ability. Different from Kumbhakarna, the damage from the ultimate will still go through. So if you get a Jormungandr low enough, you can just use your ult and outright kill him. You will not get your normal passive that puts you into the sky, heals you up, gives you the dragon form. None of that happens really, but instead you can just walk on. It's just a very brief execute with none of the other delay that happens around it and none of the other benefits that you get. But that doesn't happen automatically when the enemy Jormungandr is under threshold. They have to be under the threshold for the base damage of the ability. So if the enemy has an execute mark, that may mean that you cannot actually kill them yet, because you're not getting execute damage, you're just getting the normal base damage. And against a tank, that means they have to be very low for the ultimate to be used here, and at that point it often doesn't really make sense anymore. As our Kuang is also a stealth god, we can use this opportunity to test out how stealth works exactly. And what we can see with Jormungandr's radar is that it reveals our Kuang in stealth in basically ticking periods. It doesn't permanently reveal him, but instead shows him whenever the sonar is going outward. And that way you can kind of trace the enemy very, very well. Now, the enemy cannot see that they're being traced while they're invisible. Meanwhile, when they're visible, their character model will light up red whenever they hit by the sonar. So somebody who's above the surface and not stealth would know when Jormungandr is in a stealth and around, and would see the red light over and over and would be prepared to avoid him, possibly. Whereas somebody who is stealth would not even be able to see the same signal and would have to go with the sound. The sound of the ability is relatively loud, so you can definitely do sound play here. Basically, those playing stealth characters have to do what other players normally have to do against them and try to figure out their location through sound or through aiming abilities and hoping that they land. And speaking of landing abilities, there are actually a lot of benefits to hitting Jormungandr while he's underground. Other characters get revealed completely or don't get revealed depending on who we're talking about. For example, Morrigan or Kuang, and then on the other hand we have someone like Loki. With Jormungandr we have something in between as well. Now, Jormungandr's benefits when he is underground is he gets stealth, he gets extra movement speed, I think it's 25%, and he gets that sonar, that radar, to reveal stealth enemies. If you hit him with an ability or with a basic attack, which is possible while he's underground, then he will be revealed. That removes the radar effect, the sonar effect, at least from what we can tell visibly. It also removes the stealth, and it also removes the extra movement speed. What will remain is him being dug into the ground and him being able to use the pounce upwards, basically, that he can do with the ability to deal damage and knock enemies up. It's a lot harder for him to catch up to someone though, because he's basically going at the same movement speed as they are. So if he's coming towards you and you roughly know where he is and throw a few basics in the direction, you may be able to catch him and may be able to prevent getting caught in the knockup afterwards by just running away. As you can see, we tested this with Anhur, and there was something else we wanted to test with Anhur as well. Now, technically, Jormungandr is immune to any form of displacement, like knockbacks and knockups, etc., and even grabs. But what would happen if he gets hit by a displacement that isn't actually a CC, like Anhur's pillar? We tested that, and the result is that he gets pushed away as any other guard would, which is a very good thing because otherwise he would probably get stuck in the pillar, so it was very important for us to verify that that functions as it should. So guards like Thor, like Ymir, can still somewhat displace him a little bit to the side by using walls. The two, on the other hand, the knockback doesn't do anything. Likewise, unsurprisingly, the knockup from the 3 also doesn't happen, which kind of leaves Anhur with very limited options. He can basic attack him down, but he doesn't have any of his normal combo potential. He can't do the knockup into pillar, into knockback into the pillar, or just the pillar into the knockback or whatever. It's all just not possible because he can't push Jormungandr around at all, making him one of the weaker picks as well, as he can't use his combo really. Next up, we have personified disappointment in the form of Fenrir. Fenrir's ult looks really sad when you say Jormungandr. He just takes a quick bite out of him, deals a little bit of damage, and that's it. Because Jormungandr cannot be picked up, and all he gets for that is that little debuff. Another interaction that we wanted to test because it's a little bit different sometimes from other CC is Cerberus' ultimate. And what happens here is that Cerberus will deal damage to Jormungandr, but Jormungandr is immune to any movement that is involved in the ability, so he doesn't even get picked up. The stun, on the other hand, and the one still works as normal, no surprise here. And if the enemy is stunned and you use the ultimate afterwards, it doesn't break the stun either, so it's not like the CC would override each other or similar. Another guy that really likes to break rules sometimes is King Arthur when it comes to how things function, but in this case he's actually very consistent. King Arthur's fully charged up combo ultimate does not work on Jormungandr, so he can't pick him into the air and deal multiple damage hits to him basically. He's completely immune to the CC and the damage here. He's also immune to the knockup in the 2, but he is not immune to the low combo ultimate, which has a stun at the end, because he doesn't have an immunity to stuns. A guard that may actually fare relatively well against Jormungandr is Susano. Of course, his 2, his vortex, does not work, but he gets the damage amplification very quickly, so you can basically do your 2 and then the rest of your combo to deal a lot of damage to Jormungandr very quickly, because he is under the effect of the increased damage. And additionally, the ultimate doesn't knock up Jormungandr, But if you put down the vortex itself counts as a CC that Jormungandr is immune to, so the moment you put the vortex on the ground, Jormungandr takes extra damage when he steps into it, and then takes extra damage again if he gets hit by the knocker part of the vortex afterwards, so if you use your ultimate again. And that all comes with extra damage, and if you time it right, then you can basically stack it on top of each other. Now, Susano's ultimate was a little bit short to test this because the vortex effect can only proc once before the ultimate goes off, but the vortex effect with Hades was interesting to us. And that is because we wanted to know if, for some reason, Jormungandr stays in the vortex, the damage amplification stays on him as well. And that is not the case. If Jormungandr walks into Hades' vortex, he gets the damage amplification on himself once. Then he can walk around in the vortex, and as soon as it runs out, it will not refresh. Even if Jormungandr runs into the vortex or starts in the vortex, walks out of it and walks into it again, it doesn't refresh the passive extra damage taken, which in my opinion is very weird. I personally think that is one of the downsides he should very much have. If you're stuck in a vortex for some stupid reason, if you're, well, not playing well enough to get out of it, then you should be punished for it by taking more damage. The next card we tested was Xingtian. Here we have full immunity to the CC of the ultimate, but as long as you stay within the ultimate's area, you still take damage from it as it is intended to work right now. As for the 2, you do not get knocked up by the first part of it, but you have to move away very, very quickly if you don't want to get hit by the root that follows, because that will still hit you even if Xingtian didn't initially knock you up. Drunk effects, however, still affect Jormungandr. That means, for example, a Discordia ult will still affect him in a pretty entertaining way. It looks quite funny when he's just moving, swaying from left to right like that. That also means that Bacchus is probably going to be one of the better picks against him, as he at least has 2 different CCs that will still work against Jormungandr and can kind of prevent him from doing certain things, as well as his 3 does versus Jormungandr's burrow versus his stealth and things like that, which can be very helpful. With Sobek, the first part of his pluck will still work and lock both of them in place. It will also still deal damage, but Jormungandr cannot be flinged anywhere, and likewise the knockback on his 2 doesn't work either. Sobek's pluck can, by the way, be used to pluck Jormungandr out of his stealth if you time it really well and you just get him right when he goes underground. And in that case, he will actually be completely put out of the animation of the ability, including not being able to knock enemies up afterwards anymore. I'm assuming this is because Jormungandr gets CC'd here and therefore the effect is different, but it looks pretty funny. The last test we did was Mercury. Now, one part with Mercury is his 3, which will be a grab and a knockup if it connects. And in Jormungandr's case, it's very interesting because neither of that happens and Mercury just dashes through him. However, he does proc the extra damage taken in the process, but it must feel a bit unusual as a Mercury player that you just dash through the target right away. Whatever works is the disorient on the ultimate, which will spin Jormungandr around, and I think that is probably the funniest interaction in terms of looks that he has, because it's hilarious to see this gigantic snake just spinning around in circles very, very quickly. Something else that we also tested is if any of these immunities would end up proccing Spirit Rope, which they don't, which is a good thing. Meaning you can't just try and negate the extra damage taken by putting a Spirit Rope in your build. That is because you're not actually getting CC'd, you're immune, so it can't actually proc. However, I do want to say that in its current state, Jormungandr's passive is too strong in my opinion. The immunity is one thing, and I understand why it is the way it is, and I can accept that. But the big problem is that the immunity is A, to so much CC, and it's not just limited to banishes and knockups. There's a lot of things where you could theoretically have him work with that, like for example vortexes, and it's still immune. And on the other hand, the fact that he only gets a little bit of extra damage taken for a very short period of time, that basically sometimes runs out during the CC animation, is in my opinion not enough to offset the benefits that he gets, considering that he's not only a counter to all those CCs, but also a counter to stealth at the same time. I think this counter guard counters a little bit too much while not really having enough counters himself. At the end of the day, we'll have to see how it turns out in game, but that's my impression so far. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, and maybe the like button too. And again, thanks to Alpha Jackal for helping me out, so check him out as well, support him. Channel should be linked at the start and will be linked down below as well. And other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. But before I go, also the note, if you have more questions about Jormungandr, I will definitely test more things. Everything that's not included here, you can ask about that, and I will see about that in a future video. DukeSloth, out.